Roll 'em. Action.
Arthur.
Cut!
Haven't you heard of suspension of disbelief?
Hi, welcome to Sequel Bate. I'm Richard.
And I am Robert.
And this is a podcast where we each take turns pitching a potential sequel to a pre-existing movie. And they're probably going to be terrible, but that's by design.
Yes, exactly. Because when you really think about it, some movies deserve sequels, others definitely don't. And that's going to happen a lot on this show. So after we each pitch our prospective sequel to a movie, the other person is going to play an out-of-touch producer and give horrible notes that we have to include in the repitch. I completely wish that was a thing that doesn't happen, but in Hollywood it actually does. So, we're going to replicate that kind of a process and see where this takes us.
Should be fun.
Yeah. So for this week, we are going to be doing a prospective sequel to Twister, the 1996 movie directed by Jan de Bont, who before this directed Speed and Speed 2, if anyone's ever seen that monstrosity.
In case you haven't seen it, Twister is a movie about tornadoes, as you might have guessed.
I thought it was about the board game, like the mat. You touch the...
No. Have you been reading my sequel notes?
Oh, God. Oh, no spoilers.
Yeah, no. No, Twister is a movie about tornadoes, specifically about a group of tornado chasers attempting to get a new technology that they have developed to study the insides of tornadoes, and basically they're trying to throw these little balls up into tornadoes and get all kinds of data from them. But over the course of the plot, they're divorcees, or they're about to be divorced, and through the magic of tornadoes, they fall in love again. Yeah. Great movie. It was a huge part of my childhood. I watched it like way too much. I mean, we grew up in the Midwest, so that's very near and dear. Yeah, it holds a special place in our hearts, even if it wasn't the most critically acclaimed movie.
No.
But it stars Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Cary Elwes is also in it, Philip Seymour Hoffman, other notable names.
Mm-hmm. Todd Field, who's become a pretty acclaimed director in his own right. Just like an all-around fun disaster action thriller kind of movie. So what we're going to do is we're each going to pitch a sequel that, and like it's kind of up to us, but like a sequel that either we would like to see or we're just going to have fun with the idea of making a needless sequel. The one that I'm going to pitch, it's something that I probably would like to see. Richard, it sounds like you're going to pitch something completely different.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe the words that I'm going to say.
Awesome.
Something completely different. Robert, why don't you start us off with your sequel idea?
Okay.
And no, I'm not purposely trying to save mine for last.
Okay, so before I start, I wanted to just briefly pitch my original idea. Unfortunately, I'm going to add a little bit of realism because Philip Seymour Hoffman is no longer with us. But if he was, the idea that I had was that his character Dusty was actually going to randomly, out of nowhere, meet up with Bill's ex, Melissa. Because remember, they hated each other in the first movie. And basically, through a series of tornadoes, it becomes a romantic buddy comedy, just hijinks. And eventually, by the end of the movie, they realize they actually, the whole time, really loved each other.
This sucks up.
Oh.
But that's not what I'm going to pitch.
Brought to you by Hallmark.
Yes. So what I am pitching is a very relevant sequel.
Oh, no.
Yes. So the title of this is Twister: The Greenhouse Effect. Here's how the movie begins. So tornado warnings have vastly improved since Dr. Joe Harding and her team's groundbreaking research in the 1990s. However, there's a recent uprising in tornadoes around the world, even in places that don't normally experience tornadoes, which is rendering her new warning system completely obsolete. It's called the Harding warning system, after Bill and Joe Harding. So in our opening scene, Joe is running the NSSL lab, which, if you remember the end of the first movie, they were arguing about who's going to run the lab, who's going to do the research. And,
oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it's filled with the members of the old team. Like, they're all upgraded, all working on computers, and they're tracking a storm in their area. However, for the first time, nobody seems to know what the storm is thinking. And at a loss for options, Joe looks up across the room, and there is a memorial portrait of her late husband, Bill Harding. Because because we have to acknowledge Bill Paxton, unfortunately, is also not with us anymore. And she, of course, surely Bill would know what the storm is thinking. And in that kind of trance-like state, she walks slowly to the entrance of the building and sees a supercell churning in the sky above. Big Twister strikes, nearly kills everybody in the NSSL.
I have a question.
Yes.
Underneath Bill Paxton's portrait, does it say, in quotation marks, the extreme?
Oh, absolutely. He is the extreme. So, so afterwards, the president of the NSSL is telling Joe that, over the past few years, the faith has been kind of turning on the Harding warning system because clearly it wasn't able to predict tornadoes such as the one that just struck them. And by proxy, her team is kind of obsolete as well. So everybody is fired.
Okay.
On the way out, Joe, packs her things and passes by the portrait of Bill, which is now torn and tattered. Because symbolism! So
now it's torn and tattered to the point where it just says the X on the bottom.
Okay. So 6 months later, everyone has gone their separate ways across the Midwest. The team is just scattered. We find Joe at a bar, just completely defeated. And on the television are members of Congress discussing legislation on climate change, which of course she's watching in utter disgust.
Right.
Remember I said this is going to be a relevant sequel.
Right.
So enter our new character, Bill McKendry. Another Bill. He's a young climate scientist who's been trying to get a hold of Joe for a while, and he explains to her, pointing at the TV, that he's building on a team that's going to take on Congress on climate change.
Oh, no.
And he points out that Joe, more than anyone else, has actually seen the evidence of these tornadoes and understands, that something extraordinary is happening. This is not normal. And of course, she's reluctant at first, but then after an emotional call with Aunt Meg, she takes on the challenge.
Okay.
So the second act is part legal thriller, part disaster film. As Joe Harding and Bill McKendry are not only building a stronger and stronger case about the inevitability of climate change, but they're also starting to develop feelings for one another. Meanwhile, we're cross-cutting with tornado attacks that are striking in bizarre places like snowy mountain slopes. So imagine people that are mountain climbing and a friggin' tornado hits. It's crazy action sequences. And as their TV presence is growing, all the scattered members of her team, one by one, are realizing what's happening, and they start coming back to join her. So we're getting the whole team back together again.
All right.
And of course, in this act, we're going to meet the primary villain, Congressman Paul Riley. He has ties to the oil industry, blah, blah, blah. Point is, acknowledging climate change doesn't make him any money. So the further and further that Bill and Joe are going with their court case, the more threatened he is, and he starts to resort to smear campaigns, pointing out how the warning system is getting people killed, blah, blah, blah. This all leads to our third act climax, which goes all the way to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So it's Congressman Riley versus Bill McKendry and Dr. Joe Harding and Joe's team in the audience. Now, as the court proceedings are underway, Joe and her team can't help but notice that the rain hitting the windows is getting harder and harder.
Oh.
Yes. And after an explosive thunderclap, the team whips out their laptops and starts scanning the Doppler, and sure enough, a twister is inbound in the District of Columbia. In downtown D.C., a tornado is forming. But of course, Congressman Riley thinks that this is merely an overreaction, and as everyone takes cover, a window breaks and he is sucked right out the Supreme Court. So in the aftermath of our third act climax, the justices, the media, Joe and her team are all saved, and now the tide is turned, and the justices are asking her, okay, what do you need from us? The film ends with the team walking down the Capitol steps, destroyed, media asking a million questions, and they're all looking up at the sky and knowing that they have a difficult task ahead of them. And that is Twister the Greenhouse Effect.
In the background, you can see in the Capitol building the Washington Monument speared through it.
Yeah. Yes. Why not? I mean, it's not Roland Emmerich, but Jan de Bont did crash an entire boat through a town in Speed 2, so anything's up for grabs at this point.
Man, my idea is way less detailed and thought out than that one.
No, I didn't mean for it to be this detailed, but I kind of got carried away as I was writing it, so
that's fair. I've had 10 minutes to think of mine, so.
Well, I cannot wait for this. So, Richard, enlighten us on your.
Oh boy. All right. So my idea. This is our first episode, and I'm already going to shatter the idea of sequel baits, and instead this will be called prequel baits.
Ooh, yeah, because this is actually an option that we're going to take on.
So mine is a prequel where we have, it's set maybe 15 or 20 years before the events of the first Twister, so that way we can have new actors playing the younger versions of all of our main characters.
Ooh, okay, so we're going to kind of Stephen King's it a little bit. That was way too many its.
Yes. So we open up in a school, we'll say high school. I don't remember how old the characters were, but we'll say that in the it's like seniors, so that we can age them up and have romance options without it being creepy.
Oh, absolutely. You can't go that way.
Played by 25 to 30-year-old actors, though.
Oh, absolutely.
So, anyway, our main character, whom we will follow through most of the first act, or all the first act, most of the second, is Bill Harding.
Mm-hmm.
So young Bill Paxton is in a schoolyard fight because, do you remember that time he punched Carrie Elwes?
You stole my design, you son of a bitch!
In the sequel, he has to be a schoolyard tough where he's gets into trouble all the time and is beating somebody up for whatever reason. Who cares?
Who would you pick to play young Bill Paxton?
For young Bill Paxton, I'm gonna cast Liam Hemsworth.
Ooh, good choice. Well, for Helen Hunt, you gotta cast Lelia Sobieski because she's perpetually looked like a young Helen Hunt like her entire life, which is very strange to look at, actually.
Yeah. Okay. I have to look up who that is. Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah, she looks exactly
right.
like Helen Hunt. It's really freaky.
I'll allow it. But yeah, I still think Carrie Elwes could probably play Carrie Elwes.
Yeah, that man is aged quite well.
Maybe that's the kid who he's beating up in the beginning of the thing in the high school playground. It's just
48-year-old Carrie Elwes. Sure, why not? Let's go for it.
Anyway, he gets suspended. You can show like his parents saying, "Hey, quit being a shithead." He's like, "No, you can't tell me what to do." Anyway, he ends up near the end of Act 1. He ends up in a nearby forest, and he's just kind of wandering around after he's skipped school. Sky's really cloudy. What's that? A fucking tornado shows up. So then for our first action scene, which is what it is because it shows our young Bill Paxton sprinting through this forest as trees are just being fucking harpooned into every direction and trees are exploding. The CG budget's $2 billion for this one scene. Just so much shit on the screen while he's sprinting through the woods trying to escape from this tornado that's basically chasing him. He dives into like a drainage pipe to save him, but he's not alone. Who else is in there?
Oh no!
But Dusty.
Oh yes, yes.
And that's where he meets Dusty for the first time. And Dusty's like, "Man, aren't tornadoes fucking sweet?" He's like, "Yeah, they are pretty cool, I guess." Weird kid in the sewers. Anyway, so they team up, and the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2 starts where they decide, hey, you know what? We're done with school. We don't know what to do. Let's become tornado chasers because there's a lot of money in that.
Now that is a risky type of delinquency. I totally dig that.
So Act 2 basically starts with them, quote, putting the team together, which is going to be the exact same characters from the first movie, including Joe Harding is there as well. And so you can have the beginnings of a budding romance between the two as they are the ones that are kind of taking charge. But they're not really... It can be like a montage similar to the I meant like a tornado chasing montage. They're not really getting anything super big. It's all a bunch of like low level stuff, and they're trying to give their footage to the news, and people are kind of interested, but there are a lot more professionals doing this job anyway.
So it's kind of like Nightcrawler, but instead of getting murder footage for the news, they're getting tornado footage for the news.
Act 2 ends with Joe and Bill going on what I guess you could consider their first actual date trying to be a couple. And where is it? It's at the same drive-in movie that we were at before in the first movie.
No way.
Show starts in 7 minutes.
And what do you know? Fucking a tornado shows up.
Oh, it's great.
But instead of it being, hey, an F5 was pretty big in the first movie. What's bigger than an F5, Robert?
An F6.
Yeah. F6 shows up. I'm pretty sure F6s aren't possible.
Yeah,
but,
'cause I'm pretty sure an F5 covers like a certain amount of destruction and beyond. It's like...
yeah, it's just kind of a blanket term because most shit doesn't get that gnarly. However, F6 shows up. How do you know it's an F6? I don't know. It's like the size of a state or something. But anyway, it shows up. There's a chase scene again. They're running away from it, and they're like, holy shit, this is a huge tornado. And then Act 3 is them trying to, like, I guess, learn more about it. This is kind of where my idea breaks down because I don't have a good Act 3. Not to say that the other acts were any good. However, I know how it's going to end. Act 3 starts with them celebrating because their footage from the F6 chase at the drive-in is like the only footage that anybody has because of how devastating the tornado was. So they become big because of that. And so they're all celebrating, and everybody's like been drinking. Bill is pretty drunk, but oh shit, F6 shows up again, and they're getting readings, and they go chase it down. Another action set piece. F6 is big enough, maybe like a big ship is just flying through the air, and they're like, that kind of ship is only on the Atlantic. What's it doing all the way out here?
Oh, God.
And, I don't know. Anyway.
So we've gone from tossing cows and semi-trailers, now we got ships.
Yeah, because you gotta go bigger. But the end, and this is the important bit that leads into Twister, is in a drunken stupor, Bill at some point staggers up to the tornado with his empty beer bottle, his beer bottle, and hucks it into the tornado, it never touching the ground, obviously. And at that point, like as he watches this bottle as the tornado is dissipating in front of him, and he realizes like what was going on, like the beer bottle never hit the ground or whatever. Maybe that was just a Dusty story. But in any case, that's where he gets the idea for Dorothy.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that I'm pretty sure it was a bottle of Jack Daniels in the movie. He chucks the bottle into the Twister and never hits the ground. So not only does Dusty get the idea, get the story of the extreme, but this is the birth of Dorothy.
Yeah, that's where he gets the idea for Dorothy.
I love that. Like,
it's called, and the movie is going to be called Twisters, plural.
Like Aliens and Predators?
But only it's the prequel, so we have to make the naming convention nonsense.
Okay, so now begins the section of our show where we take on out-of-touch producers' notes. This is based on real-life accounts that happened in Hollywood. So basically, because I pitched first, Richard is going to play the out-of-touch producer and give me a couple of notes that he wants me to work into the script, and I must repitch quickly. So without further ado, Richard, let's hear your notes.
Okay. So I thought your idea was pretty good, but what if we were to say that halfway through production, Christopher Nolan takes over as the director?
Oh, God. Well, we'd have to include a few factors. In which case, I would probably have to completely rearrange my movie structurally so that we are constantly cross-cutting between the Supreme Court case and the events leading up to the Supreme Court case, so that everything is chronologically completely out of order. And I guess the score will no longer be done by Mark Mancina, but now is going to be Hans Zimmer. We got to include some, of course, for the tornado appearances. And the whole movie shot in IMAX. So yeah.
Oh, sweut.
Yep.
Which I don't know. Maybe that worked out for the better.
Actually, I think you may have just improved.
Damn. I didn't mean to do that. Well, that's fine. What we can do to help pay for all of that is we need to include a copious amount of product placement.
Oh, no.
So what if we were to take, say, well, okay, Jack Daniels was mentioned in the first movie. So
That's true.
what if Jack Daniels wants in on some of the Twister greenhouse effect profits?
Okay, so now, this is more of a Robert Zemeckis style thing, but what if now Joe has a drinking problem? So not only is she
and her problem is she doesn't have enough Jack Daniels.
That could actually, okay, so maybe that's the low point of the movie. So they're about to go to Supreme Court, and like Denzel Washington in Flight,
Yeah, I was
she's
gonna
in
say
no
like a
shape.
Flight thing.
Yeah, she is in no shape to take on this court case, and the younger Bill is like, Joe, you're better than this. Like you don't need that. You don't need that bottle. And here's the kicker. She decides I can't do this and walks away back to her home in the Midwest, sees a tornado, tops off that bottle, walks up to the Twister,
Oh, yeah.
says have a drink, and chucks that bottle into the Twister. And then she's able to walk away.
Yeah.
And take on the Supreme Court. Oh, you actually...
Suitably terrible.
That was a wonderful modifier. Thank you. Okay, so high school Twisters.
Twisters.
Your characters, it's in the high school. Because of their age, typically I think you would think it would probably be like more of the 70s,
Sure.
but since Stranger Things
Whatever.
is huge, we're going to say it's the 80s.
Sure.
So because of the 80s, certain things were trendy at the time. You now need a robot character
Oh, no.
built into the plot. Yes, because the 80s were
Okay.
all about their robots.
All right. Dusty's a bit of a loner. Find him in the sewer. He's got a little robot friend with him that he hangs out with and he talks to because he's, a lonely sort of weird kid. Throughout the movie, Bill sort of helps bring him out of his shell. And maybe that could be the dramatic moment during the second scene or second act chase with the F6 is the robot sacrifices himself to save him. And the robot's name is Dorothy.
Oh, come on.
Named after like Dusty's. They find out later it could be like Dusty's mom died when he was really little or something, and he named the robot Dorothy because he couldn't cope with the loss. And then he finally learns to let his mother's loss go and sort of move on, and that's when the robot is like left behind and gets destroyed by a fucking tornado.
So, all these tornadoes, like, the whole theme of Twister is that this is like freak storms. Like, these aren't normal tornadoes.
Yes.
What if this isn't a natural or, like, occurrence, but rather a supernatural one? So what I need you to do is somehow tie this into the cinematic universe of X-Men.
Oh, shit.
Because this is going to make double the money.
Yeah, that's probably how it'll work. Hang on. As Bill Paxton / Liam Hemsworth has just thrown the Jack Daniels bottle into the tornado, who else do you see standing there but it's Storm?
It's a Halle Berry in a cornfield.
Well, I was going to say the young Storm, like from X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, she shows up, and she seemingly unhurt, and Liam Hemsworth is like, "Hey, are you all right? Like, what's going on? This is weird. Also stupid." And she hands him a box full of Dorothy's. I don't know.
Is that also further where the X-treme comes from?
No, that's stupid.
Well, I think we have jumped several sharks in these out-of-touch producer notes. That was a fun thought experiment, Richard. I really enjoyed both our movies.
Yeah. I mean, thought is a really strong word for what happened.
Yeah, I guess they were a little more like brain farts in a way.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, well, that ends our whirlwind of a first episode of Sequel
Was that a
Bate.
pun?
No. What are you talking about?
A weather pun? a pun about weather because we
I don't know.
talked about Twister.
I don't know whether or not that was a pun. But
All right.
Oh God,
I'm not doing this podcast anymore.
All right. Well, anyway, so we each collectively we pitched 4 movies. Which of the 4 would you like to see? We'd love to hear from you guys. You can tweet us at Sequel Bate, and that's BATE, because we're
5 years old.
Yes, very much so.
And be sure to catch us next time when we try to destroy yet another beloved movie.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure it will go just as well as this one did.
But yeah, follow us on Twitter at Sequel Bate, and we love to hear from you guys. Catch you next time.
See ya.
This is the most unprofessional set I have ever been on!